So today I'm going to be teaching on Roman rule and the Herods. So what we're going to look at is that Rome ended up in Judea because they quickly wanted to expand east, and how that expansion influenced the ruler King Herod the Great and his descendants, and how that actually has a greater impact in the life of Jesus in his ministry. And we're going to see how some of the famous rulers, the different Herods and the different Romans, are mentioned in Scripture, and how that has a greater impact in the ministry and life of Jesus. So beginning in the Roman period, we are going to see, looking at the time space and frame of 63 BC to 135 AD, we're going to see that the reason that Rome was in the Judea area in the first place and impacted Jesus in his ministry is that Rome was looking at two targets in mind. We see one was Egypt. They were looking at Egypt because of its famous wealth, academies, and also agricultural produce. And Rome was also looking at Syria. Now, Syria was known as the gateway to the Euphrates Valley, and Rome knew that if they could have control over the upper Euphrates River, that they'd be able to stop any threat coming from its rival Persia. So in order to make that happen, we see that Rome employs a very famous man named Pompey the Great. Now, Pompey was around from 106 to 48 BC. Now, he became involved in politics and in the military at a very young age. We see in an article from historyskills.com that Pompey the Great rose to power at the age of 20, and he took over the army from his own father. Now, even at the young age of 20, he was given control over big tasks, such as handling all of the piracy in the Mediterranean, and we see he was very successful at that. And that's taken from an article at thecollector.com. And so we see that Pompey the Great already started building his resume. We see he was successful in previous wars in Sicily, Africa, and in Spain, and that he followed in the footsteps of Alexander the Great, which is where he gets the name Pompey the Great. And so Rome employs him to begin the invasion of Syria. And we see that in 64 BC that Syria falls to Pompey the Great. And after claiming Syria, he moves on to the Judea area. Now, what's interesting about Judea being the next target is that Pompey stumbled upon a very good time to attack the Judea area. Now, the reason that it was a good time to attack was that there was a civil war happening in Jerusalem. We see that that different factions were supporting rival brothers for the Jewish throne. And so Pompey does something very interesting and very genius, and he liberates Damascus and other Greek settlements, and he promises them freedom from the Hasmonean rulership. And so he tells them that under his Roman administration, that they wouldn't have to live under Jewish rule ever again. And so the people there had been under the Hasmonean dynasty for over 100 years, so they jump at the opportunity to join Pompey the Great. And a lot of those troops join in a one-day siege of Jerusalem, and we see that over 12,000 Jews die, and he becomes very successful in sieging Jerusalem in 63 BC. And so after that, we have Roman occupancy in the Judea area, which is what leads into Herod the Great and his relationship with Rome. So for the next couple of decades, we have this balance of Jewish leadership also dealing with cooperating with Rome politically, but also having some passive resistance in that as well. And so a very notable ruler was Herod the Great. Now, he ruled from 37 to 4 BC. Now, Herod the Great was known, he's mentioned in Scripture, but he's also very well known for his building projects, such as his fortresses. Herod's palace was huge, and he was also very well known for the Caesarea Maritima harbor. Now, in his rulership, we see something very interesting about Herod the Great was he was also constantly paranoid. Now, we learn that Herod the Great was only considered half Jewish by many people because his mother was actually Arab. So he always felt like an outsider amongst the families of the Hasmoneans. So in order to try to help remedy that problem, he marries one of the Hasmonean daughters named Mariamne, trying to help form a connection with the Hasmoneans. But we see that actually causes more conflict and more tension because he's viewed as an interloper. And so he was so worried about the throne, he was so suspicious and worried about conspiracy theories and attempts that he actually arranges to have two of his own sons by Mariamne killed, in quotes, by accident. And we see that altogether that Herod the Great executed 45 Hasmoneans because of conspiracy theories and attempts. And so in living in constant fear of uprisings, he was unfortunately known as a very brutal and merciless king. And so notable children that come from Herod the Great is Herod Philip I, Herod Archelaus, and Herod Antipas. Now they are all mentioned in Scripture. Herod Philip I in Mark chapter 6, Herod Archelaus in Matthew 2, and Herod Antipas in Luke chapter 13. Now, these are significant in the ministry and in the life of Jesus, primarily because if we were to look at the life of John the Baptist, that Herod Antipas was actually the one that puts John the Baptist to death. Now we see a descendant from them being Herodias. Now we see that in that story that she marries her uncle Herod Philip I and her second and another uncle Herod Antipas, and her daughter was Salome, and we see that she dances in exchange for the head of John the Baptist. Now that's mentioned in Scripture in Matthew chapter 14 and also in Mark chapter 6. So we see that this occupancy of Rome leads into this relationship with the Hasmonean and Jewish rulership, and that stemming from Herod the Great, there are some notable children, including further down the line, Herod Agrippa I and Herod Agrippa II. That's important. Herod Agrippa I was responsible for the death of James, and he throws Peter into prison, and we see he's actually struck down by an angel eventually. And Herod Agrippa II, he is seen in Acts chapter 25 and 26, where Paul makes a legal defense before him. So we see altogether that the Herods did have a major impact and were highly involved in the life, in the story and ministry of Jesus in some of those major movements. And we see that this is all partly under that Roman occupancy as well.